Be honest about your own weaknesses and strive to improve them. The journey of life is not about winning every game, but about finding joy in every level. Today, we're going to talk about a subject many of us have faced, either in our own lives or in the lives of those we love: addiction. But we're going to approach it from a perspective that might be new to you. This is not a story about willpower, about being strong enough to resist a destructive force. This is a story about pain, about healing, and about the deep, almost sacred connection between our shadows and our highest selves. Think of addiction not as the enemy, but as a messenger. It is not the problem, but a symptom of something far deeper. It is a cry for help from our soul, an attempt to numb a pain we haven't been able to face. The enemy isn't the substance or the behavior. The enemy is the silent suffering that it seeks to alleviate. In this journey, we'll discover how to stop fighting the symptoms and start listening to the message. We'll learn to transform this destructive search into a profound path of self-connection. We will explore 4 key stages on this path: the path of the shadow, the pause of yearning, the soul's gaze, and finally, the hero's journey. The first step on our journey is to understand what addiction is truly a manifestation of. For this, we turn to the wisdom of Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. Jung believed that everything we deny and repress within ourselves does not simply disappear. It lingers in the darkness of our unconscious, forming what he called our shadow. And this shadow has a habit of showing up in our lives in destructive ways, often disguised as the very behaviors we feel we can't control. Addiction, in this context, is not a moral failing. It is a manifestation of a wounded soul. It is the shadow trying to get our attention. So, the first technique is not to fight the shadow, but to embrace the pain it reveals. Fighting it only gives it more power, more life. As Jung himself is often quoted as saying, "What you resist persists." Instead of fighting, we must become like a detective, approaching our inner world with curiosity and without judgment. We ask not, "Why am I so weak?" but rather, "What is this feeling, and what is it trying to tell me?" Let's explore 5 ways the shadow can manifest through addiction. Think of them as different terrains on this inner map. The mountain of guilt. This is the constant, crushing feeling of not being good enough. The addiction becomes a way to escape from the relentless self-criticism. We climb this mountain trying to outrun our perceived failures. The river of grief. This is the search for numbness, a way to anesthetize ourselves from unprocessed trauma or a profound loss. The addiction is the boat we take to sail away from the powerful, painful current of our sorrow. The reed of fear. Here, the addiction acts as a shield, a place to hide from a perceived threat, whether it's the fear of failure, rejection, or vulnerability. We become as fragile as a reed, swaying with every imagined gust of wind, the wind of restlessness. This is the attempt to fill an existential void, a deep sense of emptiness or meaninglessness. We chase the addiction to quiet the inner turmoil, just as the wind howls in an empty space, the shadow of oblivion. This is the desire to completely erase painful memories. The addiction is a way to hit the reset button on our mind, a fleeting escape from a past that haunts us. Let's look at some real-world examples. Think of the person with an overwhelming work compulsion. They might not be driven by ambition, but by the deep-seated fear of not being good enough, a manifestation of the mountain of guilt. Or consider the constant urge to check social media. this isn't just a habit. It can be the wind of restlessness, a way to fill a void and avoid the deep, uncomfortable silence of being alone with our thoughts. The method is simple. Ask yourself, what pain am I trying to avoid? What is this addiction trying to tell me? Simply becoming aware of this is the first step toward healing. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. You may not be able to clean it yet, but you can finally see what's there. Once we have welcomed the message from the shadow, we are ready for the second step. This is perhaps the most crucial one. It's about creating a sacred space between the urge to act and the act itself. We call this the Pause of Yearning. There's an old Zen legend about a wise master who, one day, was overcome by an intense and unsettling desire. Instead of fighting it or giving in, he simply stood up, walked into the wilderness, and meditated in a secluded cave for 3 days. When he returned, he was not weakened by his desire, but strengthened. He found not a vice, but a profound wisdom. He had transformed the energy of his longing into a tool for self-discovery. This pause is not about struggle. It is the ma, a Japanese concept that describes the meaningful space or deliberate emptiness that gives form to the whole. In art, it's the silence between notes in a symphony. In life, it's the moment we insert between the desire and the action. Think of the contrast between the impulsive action of an addict and the deliberate, controlled release of the Zen archer. The archer does not pull the string impulsively. He waits for the perfect moment, the perfect breath, the perfect ma, before releasing the arrow. That pause is where the true power lies. The solution is simple, yet revolutionary. Create a pause. It doesn't have to be long. It could be a single deep breath, a walk around the room, or just a moment to ask yourself a question. That pause, in itself, is an act of power that changes the entire dynamic of any craving. It's a moment of conscious choice where before there was only a conditioned response. We've welcomed the pain and created a pause. Now, what do we do in that sacred space? This is where the third step comes in, the soul's gaze. This is the quality of consciousness that we bring to the emptiness of the ma. Think of the ancient alchemists. They didn't see lead as a useless, inferior metal. They saw it as raw material, filled with the potential to be transformed into gold. They didn't fight the lead. They used its energy to perform a sacred act of transmutation. This is what we do with our urges. The soul's gaze has 3 qualities. 1, it senses. It perceives the craving and the underlying pain without judgment. It feels the energy, the restlessness, the sadness, the anger as pure, raw data without labeling it as good or bad. 2, it investigates. It asks, what is this energy seeking? What does it truly need? It looks beyond the surface desire for a substance or behavior and seeks to understand the deeper need for connection, comfort, or meaning. 3, it transforms. It takes the destructive energy of the addiction and redirects it into a constructive, life-affirming action. The urge to numb pain can become the inspiration for a work of art, a new exercise routine, or a deep conversation with a friend. For example, when you feel the craving to escape, the soul's gaze allows you to see that desire not as a problem, but as a surge of energy to be transmuted. Instead of reaching for a distraction, you might pick up a paintbrush, write in a journal, or simply sit in meditation and breathe into the discomfort. You are no longer running from the pain. You are using its power for creativity and self-care. The video proposes 3 simple questions to evoke the soul's gaze. What am I feeling right now? What does this feeling want? How can I meet that need in a way that truly serves me? This is how we begin to transmute our pain into power. Now, for the final and most lasting step, how do we maintain this transformation? Here, we turn to the timeless framework of the hero's journey. In mythology, the hero doesn't defeat the monster and simply live happily ever after. The hero returns from the quest with a jewel, a lesson, a new strength, and integrates the energy of the monster into their own nature. The monster becomes a source of wisdom. This is the true meaning of healing. It's not about a final victory over your addiction. It's about the continuous integration of your shadows. The addiction, which once seemed like a curse, becomes a guide to your deepest self-knowledge. It is the roadmap to understanding your inner pain. The secret to this is not to try and change everything at once. The video suggests a simple, practical approach. Focus on just one aspect of your shadow each week. Maybe it's the mountain of guilt. For that week, every time you feel that familiar sense of inadequacy, you pause, use the soul's gaze, and redirect that energy into a small, meaningful ritual. Perhaps writing down one thing you're proud of. Small, consistent acts of transmutation, over time, accumulate into a mastery that feels natural and effortless. You're not fighting anymore. You are simply practicing a new way of being. So, let's recap the 4 steps on this journey toward freedom and wholeness. First, the path of the shadow. We stop fighting our demons and instead embrace the pain that our addictions reveal, becoming curious investigators of our own souls. Second, the pause of yearning. We create a sacred space between the urge and the action, an intentional moment of choice that shifts the dynamic from a conditioned response to a conscious decision. Third, the soul's gaze. We fill that pause with a compassionate, transforming awareness, using the energy of our urges to create rather than destroy. And finally, the hero's journey. We understand that this is a continuous path of integration where small, consistent acts of transmutation lead to a profound and lasting transformation. This is not a story about how to fight a bad habit. This is a story about how to find your way back home to yourself, guided by the very pain you were trying to escape. Thank you for joining us on this journey.